Either China is going to change the world of medicine or we might be entering the zombie apocalypse. This month, Chinese researchers will edit adult human DNA using the revolutionary process called CRISPR for the first time anywhere in the world. The researchers will attempt to cut faulty DNA out of the cells of lung cancer patients who failed to respond to all other conventional treatments. In the past, scientists have spoken out about ethical concerns around CRISPR, which is capable of causing genetic changes or germline editing, in which reproductive cells are modified, causing changes for future generations. There are also concerns that it could lead to the development of designer babies, where parents can pick out and choose certain traits to write into their children's DNA. So this is a really interesting one, because something that many things have shown is that China is not necessarily changing the gamete cells that can be passed down to their offspring. Their goal is to only edit the adult's patient immune system, T cells. So I guess the question is, why are they doing this? Why are they just focusing on one particular thing? This is also being used on patients where all their treatments are failed. So this also could this potentially lead to designer babies? Can this lead to something else? Are they also trying to do this for something else? Brian, what do you think? Is this something that could lead us down the path of no return?
Well, I'll tell you, this was the big plot device on all the Resident Evil films. And there was actually some science back there, because the T cell is the low-hanging fruit in genetic modification. You want to be able to go and modify things. So in the plot line of Resident Evil, it was cosmetic to make you look younger and take the wrinkles out. And what it did was kick off the zombie apocalypse. Now, on a more recent thing, this is what a lot of people call the Blade Runner scenario. Are we going to be able to use this type of technology so that we can have backstreet vendors in eyes with full optic nerves ready to transplant? Are we going to start patenting these? So one of the things in Blade Runner, they're actually putting serial numbers and so forth onto designer snakes and so forth. But more seriously, we're already doing gene therapy in the United States. In fact, Dell Systems actually has a single SKU for hospitals to use to buy a high-performance computing cluster specifically set up to do the calculations necessary for gene therapy. This is a logical step forward so that you can go and directly attack the defective genes that might be in the that cause lung cancer, kidney cancer, whatever. As long as you can identify the genes. And keep in mind, a large portion of the human genome has already been mapped. And they're finding out little things, different types of cancers. They've already found some genes that lead to Alzheimer's. So while the United States isn't interested, right now there's prohibitions against this in the United States. But in China, those rules are a little more lax. And so we're probably going to see a lot of the leading edge gene therapy, gene splicing, gene manipulation in China first. And who knows where this is going to go. So I chose, this is what Umbrella Corp was doing in Resident Evil. This is something that we might want to be worried about if the checks and balances in China aren't as strong as, say, in the Western world.
Now, wait a second here. Like, let me play devil's advocate for a second here. So, people are worried, even just in the United States, are worried about, GMO and altering the DNA, not just the DNA, but basically the genetics within the plants and vegetables, right? I mean, let alone now doing that for humans and, potential diseases and so on. Many people are worried about the unknown effects to the future generations, because you have the temptation of not only altering your DNA or your kid's DNA or, your multiple generations of DNA, but also removing defects, right? Things like, and Gattaca and that kind of thing, right? So, what do you think, Curtis? Is this something that we should be worried about, or is this something that we're just kind of science fiction?
Well, I think this is definitely one of those areas where our technology has leapfrogged in front of our ethical framework. Now, there are certain things that seem like a really good idea. When you talk about genetic changes that could be passed down, I think of things like the BRCA1 gene, which is an indicator for breast cancer. And this is the sort of thing where the presence has led many women to get a radical double mastectomy as a preventive measure. If that could avoid being passed down, most people would say that's a good thing. On the other hand, you do have things about designer babies. We've seen more and more that if a child could be offered some sort of advantage, there are parents who have no ethical issues in doing that, kind of regardless of what the side effects might be. The fact is, though, that here in the West, we tend to get very concerned about how something is done, sometimes to the exclusion of what is done. And I think this may be one of those cases. If we could have the same sort of therapeutic effect through other means, we wouldn't mind. It's the how that we have trouble with. And obviously, there are a lot of labs in various parts of Asia, not just China, but we've seen this sort of thing in South Korea as well, where they operate under a slightly different ethical framework and are able to get somewhat different results.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think, different countries might, like Brian points out, even you point out, different countries have different lax, don't necessarily worry about less or don't worry about specific things. And so they potentially make broader strokes and leap higher bounds in research because of that. I guess this is just an interesting one, though, because this means that potentially they could do things that that we find that some countries actually find ethically immoral, and then maybe even make an advance in technology and in biomedicine because of that. So I think it's kind of a teeter between the two. What do you think, Brian? Is that something that maybe might be hindering us from moving forward, or some of the other countries out there from moving forward?
I think it's a lot of just more cautious steps. There's a lot of good things about the Food and Drug Administration. They've managed through their approval process to catch some really, really bad drugs. One of the things that is moving forward in the United States that I'm really looking forward to is they're talking about using stem cells to rebuild teeth instead of having root canals and so forth. I'm sure a lot of people would rather have a regrown tooth than having a post drilled into your jaw and a ceramic tooth mounted on that. So we are moving forward. I just think we should be really cautious and make sure that we've looked around every corner and turned over every rock to make sure we're not going to create the zombie apocalypse.